Welcome back to Critical Policy Conversations. I'm your host, Eric Felix, an assistant professor at SDSU in community college leadership. Our theme for today is Latinx advocacy from the streets to the trustee seats. Our special guest today is Cindia Velasco, Deputy Director at NALEO Educational Fund. Another fellow Titan alumnus, a lifelong Dodgers and Lakers fan, so October is keeping her busy cheering both of them on in the playoffs. Now let's learn more about our guests, their work, and discuss a few related stories in the news this week. Before we formally start the conversation, I'm just wondering how you're doing. I know it's heavy in this current context, but how do you sustain yourself? How do you keep engaged with the work that you do?
Every day I wake up and I say, October surprise, another October surprise. So this month, even though it's day 6, has felt overwhelming, but the thing that has sustained me, and it's October, so I have to talk about it. My beloved Lakers, my beloved Dodgers. So the Lakers are in the finals. The Dodgers are going to actually play against Are you a Padres fan?
No, I'm a Angels fan and a Dodgers fan. So I was born in Anaheim, so Angels fan.
I was like, wait, I know that you teach in San Diego, so I had to ask that. If you were a San Diego fan, I would have cut this.
And doing my research for this conversation, found out you were a second grade teacher, and now you're the Deputy Director for Constituency Services, NALEO Education Fund. Can you share more about your educational journey and what drives your advocacy work?
In sort of thinking about this question and even hearing and watching some of your other policy conversations, which have been just fantastic and very informative. Thank you for asking me to do one of these. Sort of a common thing that I heard is sort of being first gen, right? And my parents immigrated here from Mexico. My dad is a construction worker. My mom works in the service industry in a hotel. So growing up, I think it's what we've always heard, right? Like ponte las pilas and get your education. For me and my younger brother, in education has really served as social mobility vehicle. Going into undergrad and sort of being at Cal State Fullerton as a junior, senior, being able to work within the system and the structures to be able to give other students like myself the opportunity to have social mobility within this. I was like, that's what I want to do. So after graduation, I entered the classroom. And now looking back, I cannot believe that someone entrusted me with their children and sort of was doing that work, which is very hard work. And I just want to say, if there's folks that are teachers, including yourself being a professor, that are watching, just want to say thank you so much, especially this year. We know the difficulty in transitioning so quickly from a in-person environment to a fully digital or mixed sort of delivery. So just thank you to all the teachers. But after my 3rd year, it sort of felt like everything that I did in the classroom, as hard as I worked, it had a small impact. And I say that because the out-of-school factors that my students and their families faced when they left my classroom impacted them a lot more than sort of the work that I was doing. So that made me get out of the classroom, go to graduate school and learn more about the out-of-school factors that impact our students and their families today. Sort of through my graduate work, I became familiar with my organization, NALEO Educational Fund. And after graduate school, I was fortunate enough that I got employed by the organization. It's where I've been ever since. NALEO Educational Fund is a national, nonprofit, nonpartisan organization. And the mission of our organization is to facilitate the full participation of Latinos in the American political process, all the way from citizenship to public service. Within our organizations, there's 3 departments, and we all collectively work with one another to fulfill our mission. First department, and I feel like this is the department that most folks are familiar with. This is how I became aware of my organization, is that of our civic engagement team. I like to say that they are the boots and the ears in our community. And like I mentioned, our organization is nonpartisan. So you won't really see our organization sort of sign on to advocacy issues like some of our sister organizations do, but where you will see our organization and folks of our civic engagement team is out there informing voters how to cast a ballot. So our civic engagement team will inform folks of upcoming elections, sort of where to get more information on their ballots, information of their polling location. So anything election related. The second department that I will highlight for you is that of our policy research and advocacy team. So like I mentioned, even though we don't really sign on because we're not an advocacy organization, we are nonpartisan, you won't see NALEO sign on to, again, advocacy issues, but where you will see NALEO definitely take a stand on are issues that present themselves as barriers for any Latino trying to participate in the American political process. So the census, which I'm hopeful that we could talk about a little bit later on, that is something that our organization will definitely tackle. The Voting Rights Act, you'll see NALEO take a stance on that. Gerrymandering and redistricting, which is going to happen right after the census, that's where you'll see the organization take a stance in. And the last department is our Constituency Services department, and that's my department. And the main charge of our organization is to strengthen the governing skills of our membership. And our members, they're composed of Latinos serving in different elected and appointed offices all throughout the nation. We have a cross jurisdiction of office being represented all the way from community college trustees to congressional members. So really in my role, what I try to do, I like to say to folks that I connect the dots, and I'm there to assist our members be the best public officials that they could be. Again, anything to sort of strengthen the governance skills and the capacity of our members in their communities. Do you mind me asking you during like the census and even like for the voter piece, like what your campus is doing? Do you know what they're doing in regards to like census efforts?
Yeah, so, right now, and thinking about campus engagement is just email, right? So like I'm engaged with the campus by the emails I receive. And off the top of my head, I haven't seen anything related to the census in the last couple of weeks or months, specifically. So I'm probably not the best person to speak on it, but as an individual faculty member, part of the SDSU community, I am not aware of any specific outreach either for students or the campus community to be engaged with the census taking process.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just wanted to ask, just because it's something that we ask all of our our trustees.
You raise a good point in terms of why the census is so important, why there has been, as this headline shows, a concerted effort to limit the time we have for census taking. And then given your role at NALEO, what it means specifically for the Latinx community.
We have seen just, and I know, like where to start, right, with the census. We've seen just a concerted effort from this administration time and time again to want to undercount Latinos in this country. So for folks that don't know about the census, it's mandated, right, by the US Constitution that every 10 years, every person living in this country has to be counted. So every 10 years, we participate in the census. In the last census that happened in 2010, my organization did research with other organizations, and the research findings indicated that thousands of Latino children went undercounted. And the reason that, to put it in sort of, if I'm explaining this to like my ama and my apa around like why it's so important for us to be counted at Latinos, so much money is appropriated and distributed based on sort of the numbers in your community. So all of this money is used to build public roads, for parks, for schools. It's millions of dollars. It's important because we want those resources to make our communities better. That's sort of what I tell my family when I ask them, have you gotten counted? You need to make sure that we count. Politically, sort of the impact that accurate numbers has is once we have census numbers, then we begin sort of the process of redrawing district lines that then has an impact in our election. So when you look at an administration like the Trump administration, and you think about why they want to undercount us in this country, you have to wonder if it is because of political reasons. There has been, again, like I mentioned, just attack under attack. They don't want us to count. And there has been numerous sort of like court battles about when to end data collection. I anticipate that there's going to be a lot of conversation around the data. Like, is it good data? Who was undercounted? And then even after that, we're anticipated that there's going to be a lot of legal battles around how that data is going to be used to redistrict.
So our second topic is about Latino voter engagement and also the pressing issues. So I think that in partnership with Latino Decisions, your organization surveys and tracks Latino engagement, how they're feeling about pressing issues, as well as the ways that different parties are reaching out to them. We have the freshest data in front of us this morning. With the election less than a month away and ballots being sent, at least in California this week, if not already received as of yesterday, what are the issues at stake for the Latinx community, for our parents, for our primos, for our tias about these issues? And so what are the issues that we should be talking about as we get closer to the election date?
Yes. So throughout sort of these weekly tracking polls that we have done in partnership with Latino Decisions, two top issues, and it should be no surprise that continue to come to the top every week, are how are we going to address COVID-19 and healthcare? And I think, well, this is looking for Latinos, but I think if you ask most folks, those are the two top issues that come to mind. COVID-19, the pandemic, has greatly impacted the Latino community, not only our health-wise, but also economically. We see the sectors that have been impacted the most by COVID-19, and that's the service sector. Where are Latinos employed the most? That's the service sector. So when you are scared about your health and you're scared about your income, then those are the two issues that will rise to the very, very top. My organization does a lot of research like this, and we recently found that although there are close to 30 million Latinos that are eligible to vote, only 16 million are registered. So we have a lot of work to do. When we think about that 30 million number, I mean, Latinos are just poised to determine the outcome of several sort of elections throughout levels of government, all the way from mayoral candidates to state legislators, all the way to the presidency. So like we mentioned around the census being informational hubs, having to inform also folks to register and to vote, even though that we know that there's a lot of barriers to voting, would be very important.
Our third topic is about the action, or more so the inaction of our federal government to provide the necessary support for our institutions of higher ed, but more importantly, the students that it serves, right? First generation, low income, racially minoritized students. What are things that our federal government could and should be doing to make sure that our institutions and that our students are being served during COVID-19?
I mean, we see here that the House passed Revised HEROES Act. House leaders have really put forth a meaningful relief proposal with sort of the HEROES Act. We are uncertain, or not we, I should say, I am uncertain if this is going to move on to the Senate. There's only less than a month before Election Day. We know that there is sort of a public health crisis happening within Congress right now. If you look at who's in attendance on the Hill, it's pretty empty. So because of what's going on with the coronavirus outbreak happening right now on the Hill and with the election, folks don't know if this is going to move on to the Senate. And then even with that, we know that the Senate majority right now has other priorities in regards to what to debate on the floor. And that's sort of the Supreme Court nomination on there. Higher education needs a federal relief plan that meets the economic and public health challenges posed on by the pandemic. And you mentioned some of those, even with not the HEROES Act, but with the CARES Act. When higher education institutions received that money, there was a lot of even confusion around how they could give that money out. A lot of institutions just wanted to give direct money to students to address housing insecurity, food insecurity, pay for their health packages and health programs. So whenever folks are sort of asking that question, institutions need money. They need to be funded. Unfortunately, because of sort of, again, it being October, being a little bit away from the elections and health concerns right now on the Hill, there is a lot of uncertainty around if this is going to move on to the Senate. Remember the reauthorization of the Higher Education Act? That sort of had a little bit of momentum, a little bit of gain. We were hopeful at the beginning of the year that finally we're going to get that reauthorized, and that has moved down in the docket as well. So we need folks, we need leadership in Congress, because higher ed institutions are going to need money. We know that state budgets are going to be disseminated by the pandemic right now, because budgets were passed last year. Everyone seems to be doing okay. But here in California, we've already seen a 5 to 7 enrollment drop for fall numbers. So we know that in the coming years, state education budgets are going to get slashed, and we need federal action in order for institutions to serve their students and serve them equitably with the things that we know that they need in order to be successful.
Now, yeah, you're right. I think the inability to reauthorize the Higher Education Act, going on 12 years from the Prosper Act to the College Affordability Act, there isn't necessarily any good indications that higher education will be addressed at the federal policymaking level anytime soon.
Yeah, and we thought because he's going to retire, we thought it was going to renew this sense for him, right? Like, I want to leave having this big piece of legislation passed. And unfortunately, because of the pandemic, it has just moved lower in the docket.
And I'm wondering, what are barriers that we need to address to expand participation and to see the Latinx community engaged, valued, and heard in the American political process?
I laugh not because that question is not serious, but because we know these barriers exist. We know a lot of them are intentional. And they look like they range from misinformation, right, to legitimate health concerns. Some folks are scared to step out of their house right now because of the pandemic, and they're scared to either go to a polling location when there's other people or to drop a ballot by mail. So when I laugh, I don't laugh it's serious, and we know that a lot of these things are intentional. Some of these things are not intentional. I can't stress enough, and I know that this is not a satisfactory answer, but the misinformation campaigns that have been launched, not only from this administration, but by other groups towards the Latino community to make us feel shaky about voting and how meaningful it is to cast a ballot, are really dangerous.
Right.
And in keeping sort of the same message of like being informational hubs, I take that work personally very seriously. When I say Cindia Velasco on Hurley Street, don't Google me, can help you with anything voter related, I take my role serious. I'm hopeful that folks within their street, their community, their family will also take that role seriously to be sort of an informational hub and equip yourself. I can't choose sort of just one barrier because, again, there's so many. I could spend a whole nother webinar talking about Latinos and their feelings around sending their ballots by mail. That is like a whole scope of research that my organization is looking into, because Latinos like to go to the polls and cast their ballot in person. So we're trying to figure out, is that gonna make turnout lower because they are not going to send in their ballot by mail? How much do they trust the post office right now? So there is a wide range of barriers, and some of these are new, but some of these are not so new. So familiarizing yourself with information, I think reminding people, looking at other key agencies and organizations that do this work, this voting protection work, is also very helpful. And I can't stress it enough if you are a person with the knowledge and the resources to make a call, to look online for people and help them, that is sort of what I'm hopeful. I leave a charge for everyone that's listening.
Well, great. Thank you so much. I mean, I think, like I said, that question is heavy, and it could be answered a number of ways, and there are so many barriers to participation state by state and even nationally. But I do appreciate the ways that you personalize this and allow for individuals to kind of carry some of that and dismantle it in their own families, communities. As we wrap up, any thoughts on how we move forward? Any parting pearls of wisdom about the Latinx community and continuing to be engaged in the political process?
This time, especially October, I'm just gonna talk about the last 6 days in particular has felt very heavy. Sometimes I wake up and I read the headlines because we're not on the East Coast, so a lot of things happen, and we wake up and we read them. I just go I can't believe it. I can't believe this is happening. And sometimes I wake up and I'm like, we're in a pandemic. I know what propels me forward is when I look back in history and I look at other things that the Latino community has encountered And there's always silver linings to look forward to. So thinking about like 1992 here in California with Governor like Pete Wilson, and sort of the proposition that he sort of signed on to, but that led to an incredible amount of Latinos becoming citizens and then registering. We saw so many Latinos running for office. That is sort of the silver lining that I'm looking forward to. We talked a little bit about voting, and it feels overwhelming, but I know that the Latino community is going to show out. So if there's anything that happens during this pandemic year, if we get, more voter turnout, if we get more Latinos that decide to run for office, I think that's going to make sort of these hard times worth it. And I mean, we're Latinos, like nothing, what's going to stop us? Nothing, So days get hard and things get hard, but when I think about sort of the ánimo que tiene la gente, right? Like, come on, and when you have a really bad day, call your parents, and they'll be like, "Oh, you think this is hard?" When I talk to folks also, we have that ánimo, we have that grit, and this is probably not going to be the worst stuff that we'll encounter in our lifetime. This is going to make us a little bit better. And I know when I think about moving forward, I think about that.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much for your insight and for all the work that you do with NALEO and beyond for the Latinx community. That's much appreciated.
Yeah, and go Lakers, go Dodgers.
Well, that's it for today. We wrapped up our 6th episode. Want to thank Cindia Velasco so much for their insight, their time, and their knowledge on civic engagement, political participation, and the Latinx community. Thank you.